well, and you have 5 minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll go through the three parties for questioning.
So I appreciate having been provided with the opportunity to make an opening statement. In fact, I do not have a statement this morning. I feel that the best use of time is to provide as much time as possible for questions and me to be able to advance the process.
Okay, that's fine. We'll split the time amongst the three parties then. We'll start with the official opposition, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. McClellan, thank you for being here. And at the outset, let me thank you for taking on a huge challenge. And as someone with an extensive background in the medical field and healthcare delivery, I'm sure that you haven't taken on this responsibility lightly. You are the president and CEO of a major hospital.
That's correct.
I understand that you're getting paid approximately $700,000 for that responsibility. Is that right?
That's correct.
What is the operating budget of your hospital, and what is the total staff complement there?
So the total operating budget, inclusive of all sources, including research, would be just over $850 million per year. We have just over 10,000 staff, including part-timers, and that does not include the medical staff or volunteers.
What is the operating budget for Ornge, and what is the total staff complement there?
So the total operating budget is in the range of $150 million. I actually don't know the current full-time staff complement, Mr. Klees.
Approximately, can you say?
The Auditor General has...
I'm sure that's information that's
about 400 people, Mr. Klees, if that helps.
I was going to say just short of that, but I'm sure it's in that zone, Mr. Carter.
So when you compare, Mr. McClellan, your pay and the scope of your responsibilities to the $1.4 million received by Dr. Mazza and the comparative 10,000 staff to some 400, how would you describe the decision of the previous board in approving that pay package for Dr. Mazza?
So I'm not sure I can really comment on the decision makers of others. It is fair to say that that is a significant salary compared to others in comparable positions, Mr. Klees. I was not party to any of that discussion. I'm not sure exactly what discussion did or did not take place, but it has been pointed out, and I don't disagree that that is a very large salary.
Would you have voted in favor of supporting that compensation package if you were on the board at that time?
No.
Mr. McClellan, I understand that in addition to the typical responsibilities that come with directorships, you've also taken on the task of heading up a committee to address patient safety issues at Ornge, strengthening the on-scene process, resolving the medical interior issues of the helicopters, and also conducting a review of all of the policies. That's what was reported. Can you confirm that? Is that the task that you've taken on as a director?
So I am the chair of the Quality Committee, Mr. Klees. Originally it was called the Quality of Care Committee, but with the new performance agreement it will be changing to the Quality Committee. In that position, as a director at Ornge, as a board member, we have oversight for quality issues. That does include the medical interior issue. It includes many other quality issues as well.
It's a huge undertaking. How much of your time is actually being taken up with that ominous task?
You know, it's quite variable week to week, as you might expect. It is not an insignificant amount of time. I would say in a week it could be as much as 15 to 20 hours, and in other weeks it is less.
You are familiar, obviously, with the Auditor General's report. You've seen some of the very specific references to the concerns about quality of care, response time. You are familiar with the Auditor General's specific reference to the fact that over the last, I think it was 2009-10, in that particular year, some 20 incidents were reported back to the board. Some of those involved the deaths of the patients. Obviously, quality care and quality in service delivery is a concern. What are you doing in your capacity to reach down into the front lines, whether it's paramedics or whether it's people in the dispatch area, whether it's pilots who have been very frustrated based on information that we're getting, certainly members of this committee have been getting feedback from that front line in terms of the inability that they have to actually get the job done. What are you doing to reach out to those frontline people to get their input into what went wrong and what needs to be done to restore confidence in that service?
So I'm going to address the specific aspects around what we are doing. I just have to indicate that I have no reason to question the specific dates that you gave in the Auditor General's report or the numbers, but without having the report in front of me, I'm not suggesting you want me to validate those. I just am unable to do so without the report in front of me.
I trust the Auditor General.
I think it was context, and you're more interested as to what we're actually doing. So the Quality Committee has identified 3 major issues for management to focus on. And the reason that we have chosen 3 and the specific issues relates to priority and the fact that there are other quality issues that may be of concern, but we want to ensure that they're addressed in a way that we can make progress around individual areas and not ask management to take on too much, which would not be in the best interest of patient care. So the 3 areas that we have identified through our committee for major initial focus include staffing, and staffing relates specifically to critical care paramedics and advanced care paramedics. We are concerned that we are not fully staffed. This is particularly of note in northeastern Ontario and northwestern Ontario. As a result of this, there are certain calls where we don't have the appropriate level of paramedic in order to provide optimum care. So that staffing issue is the #1 quality priority. Now, I don't want to suggest that pilot staffing is not also an issue, but the major concern is the staffing as it relates to paramedics. So that's #1. #2 is the interior issue. You mentioned that earlier, Mr. Klees, specifically as it relates to the AW 139. And the third is the quality of information that's being collected around individual calls. And I'll even extend that to certain calls where where Ornge is unable to respond. And I can indicate that there's even a greater concern beyond that because we believe that there may be circumstances where hospitals are not even putting a call into Ornge because of previous experience where Ornge has been unable to respond. So those are the 3 areas where we are asking management to focus their initial attention.
I'd like to just spend a little bit of time on the interior design. And you know, I had a discussion with Mr. McCurley when he was here about that.
About a minute left.
Time flies. And let me just put it this way. There's a medical director at Ornge today, Dr. Sawatsky. My understanding is that it was actually Dr. Sawatsky who was the medical director and had responsibility for oversight of that. One of those issues of oversight was the medical interiors, that he signed off on those medical interiors. I was told that as the medical director, he had not even been inside of one of these helicopters to determine the appropriateness of it, yet he signed off. I questioned why Dr. Sawatsky, with that background and with that record, continues to be the medical director. Mr. McCurley said, well, he's doing a good job. I don't know that that was a good job. Could you just very briefly comment on the role that Dr. Sawatsky had in approving those interiors, and whether, in your opinion, Dr. Sawatsky, keeping in mind that your role is to restore confidence at Ornge, should remain in that position?
So there may be an opportunity from others who are asking questions to address what we're doing about the medical interiors. And the reason I raise that, Mr. Klees, is that as a board member who was appointed at the end of January, we're focusing on the go forward. So I'm not really in a position to comment on what took place prior to that, the decision making. But what I would say is that for all management, that would include Dr. Sawatsky in his role as Chief of Staff, that what's most important is that they're able to function with the appropriate governance model in place, which we believe now is in place. We have discussed this with Mr. McCurley, and we believe that we do have appropriate management staff in place now with an appropriate governance model to be dealing with the work that needs to be done now and going forward. And I've not heard otherwise from Mr. McCurley in his role as interim CEO.
Thank you, and if we can move to the NDP, and who would, Jagmeet?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. I just want to start off with some areas. If you can highlight, you've addressed the three areas of concern, staffing, interior issues, and the quality of the information that both, I guess, is received regarding the calls. Just want to go into some more detail. Exactly, if you could summarize, I mean, a more expansive list of what was actually wrong with Ornge. And I understand these are the three areas that you're narrowing in, because it's hard to narrow in on everything. But what were, if you could give me a little bit of a list of some of the issues that were at Ornge when you took over as one of the members of the board?
And if I could just clarify, this would be specifically around quality of care delivery, Mr. Singh?
Yes, sorry, I should have clarified. Yes, quality care and delivery of that quality of the delivery of the care and the quality of that care.
So I'll give some context, and then I'll try and answer your question with respect to other matters that may be in front of the board. It is absolutely critical in a province like Ontario that we do have an aeromedical transport system. We have great distances between organizations. We have the need in order to get patients directly from scenes to trauma units, and it's absolutely essential. We do have some very good paramedics and pilots who are doing excellent work each and every day. From the board perspective, we wanted to ensure that there was oversight for all aspects of quality of care. And one of the early questions was, did we have appropriate information coming forward in a timely fashion in order to appropriately assure ourselves that high-quality care was being delivered? So I've mentioned the quality of information. That deals with the timeliness of information being brought forward to the board as well. Around individual incidents, reporting of incidents, as best as we can tell, information is being brought forward to the board through critical incident and sentinel incident reporting. We do have issues with respect to, as I've indicated, the staffing, interiors, and the overall quality and timeliness of information. Otherwise, we're really getting information sent to us from management about other individual issues. I'm more than happy to address any of them. There's not a specific list beyond those top three that we're monitoring. I would indicate that we are comforted by the new performance agreement that in the schedules lists many different areas that will be monitored going forward. There's nothing specific in those areas that I wanted to flag for you this morning, Mr. Singh.
That's fine then. Just going to ask you some questions on hiring, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague. With respect to hiring, who hired you for your position at Ornge, or who was involved in your appointment as a member of the board?
I was contacted by the Deputy Minister, Saad Rafi.
Okay. And was your understanding that that Minister Matthews had some input in that?
My understanding is that the Minister did have input into that, yes.
Okay. And did she contact you directly herself as well?
Prior to the board having its first meeting, I was contacted by Minister Matthews, but I can't say that that related to the decision-making process.
Okay. And just with respect to oversight, when you took over, or when you were involved, the new performance agreement was not even contemplated yet. You still had the ability to oversee what was going on at Ornge as a board member, and to review, the quality of care and to assess that. Is that correct?
Yes, just as, if I was to use a comparable situation, just as the board at my hospital through the Quality of Care Committee receives information from management on quality, yes.
Okay. Pass it over.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to see you. I wanted to know, right now when the board meets, I take it that you keep minutes of those meetings?
Yes.
When the board needs to meet in camera, do you keep minutes of the in-camera meetings?
There is some recording of in-camera discussions, yes.
Okay. When the previous board used to meet, did they also keep minutes?
I have not gone back and looked at any minutes of the previous board meetings.
Okay. Is it the secretary who keeps minutes, is it the same one that used to keep minutes before?
No, it is a new secretary who is keeping minutes now.
Okay. And since the board has been, the new board has been put in place, have you reported back to the Ministry of Health?
The board chair has had discussions with both the minister and the deputy following our board meetings. I'm not clear as to exactly what has been communicated.
Okay. So you don't, it's not a function of the board to make sure that a reporting relationship is done back to the ministry?
Right. So there are regular communications between the board chair on behalf of the board. I'm just not party to those communications, so I don't know exactly what has been communicated.
Okay. You know that your hospital is now under FOI, Freedom of Access of Information, since January this year.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Every hospital in Ontario. Ornge is not. Would you allow freedom of access of information for information that is presently at Ornge, or is this a discussion that your board would be, that you would be willing to bring to the board?
So I'm not in a position to respond on behalf of the board related to your question. I think you asked what my position would be on
Correct.
that. That's a matter that has not yet been discussed at the board. It's a matter that could be discussed at the board. The decision about how one would respond to requests for information is different than what would otherwise be a legislative decision as to whether Ornge would be included or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You've been in trauma care for a long time, and you've had to deal with transport of trauma patients to your hospital, certainly, for some times now. You've mentioned when answering to my colleagues that some hospitals are reluctant to call Ornge because of previous dealing with the air ambulance. Are they reluctant because the dealings were not positive?
I have only heard anecdotally, so that does need to be qualified, that some hospitals, particularly in northwestern Ontario, have not been calling Ornge for certain circumstances because in previous times Orange was unable to respond. That's something that we want to understand better, and the way to better understand that is to go out and to speak with those hospitals, to actually survey them, and that is something that will be done in future. But I have to indicate that the concern we have is based on anecdotal information only.
You have 2 minutes, France.
Okay. I note that your hospital, Sunnybrook, was interested in leveraging some of its knowledge, skills, etc. abroad. Is this something that you have pursued?
Yes, we are continuing to pursue international opportunities.
Okay. Had you ever pursued any of those international opportunities with Orange?
In fact, and there's maybe a bit of context for this, as the country's largest trauma center and first trauma center, much of what we are looking at around international opportunities focuses on trauma. And as such, the individuals that we're meeting with are very interested in the entire system of trauma, which includes aeromedical transport. So we did have discussions with Orange in previous years about how we may be able to work together on some of those international opportunities. Nothing has come of that, but we did have discussions with Orange.
And were those discussions regarding in Brazil and Kazakhstan, or?
Yeah, I guess those are the two specific examples that I'm aware of, yes.
Okay, but nothing came to fruition. At the time when you were looking at exporting Ontario skills and working with Orange to bring a package of trauma expertise, was Orange dealings, do you know which branch of Orange you were dealing with?
No, we were just dealing at a general level with Orange at the time. If there were any specific discussions between our lead for our international work with any specific division, I wasn't aware of that.
Thank you, and it's now time for the government to ask the questions. Who would like to ask them? Reza? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. McLennan, for taking the time and appearing before this committee. Dr. McLennan, patient safety and public safety is very important for us as members of Ontario Legislature, as well as government on this side, and I'm sure it's very important to you as well as a doctor, as a CEO of Sunnybrook Hospital, and also as a member of the board of Orange. Since your appointment to the board of Orange about 3 months ago, could you explain us what immediate steps you have taken and the board has taken to address the patient safety as relates to Orange operation?
Right. So one of the first important steps was the creation of a quality committee, and we used the framework of the Excellent Care for All Act as it relates to hospitals in order to establish that committee. That led to reporting between management and the Quality of Care Committee. And I have, in my role as chairing that committee, had meetings with management in order to deal with the same type of reporting as what exists in our hospital between our Quality of Care Committee and our board. So between management and Quality of Care Committee and the board, in that from my perspective that was the logical oversight model and the logical reporting through to the board itself. As I indicated in an answer to one of Mr. Klees' questions, we prioritized what we felt management should be focusing on initially. And importantly, when one is dealing with matters of quality of care, you need to have a trusting relationship between management and the board, so that one is sure that incidents of concern are being reported through, and that if there's concerns on the part of management, that they're clearly brought forward to the board. So much of our work has been developing those relationships, getting to know those who are involved in monitoring and reporting on care, so that we can be confident that any issues of concern are being made available to the board.
Thank you, Dr. McLennan. Dr. McLennan, there has been some discussion in the past that because of the certain design flaw in one of these, on these helicopters, then paramedics weren't able to conduct CPR on patients when they took it to the helicopters. Has this been addressed in the past, this problem, this issue?
Yeah, so this was a significant concern, and it had to do with the height of the stretcher in the interior of the helicopter, and the ability of paramedics to access and treat a patient, which would include not only CPR, but perhaps advanced airway management, intubation, other procedures. Now, there's really what I'll describe as 3 phases around dealing with the interior issue. The first was to ensure that patient transport was going to be safe until we dealt with a longer-term solution, and that resulted in a change in transport position for certain patients, and that was dealt with quite quickly once the concern was brought to the attention of the board and to management. The second phase is that by changing the pedestal design, we are able to have transport which is beyond what I would call the workaround that I've described for safe transport until we actually look at a formal redesign of the interior, which I'll call the longer term or phase 3. And we're just in the process now of implementing phase 2. I had a recent meeting of the Quality of Care Committee held at the Toronto Island base so that we could see what was being proposed. I had a chance to see it, review it with paramedics and the medical leadership, and it is a very logical step in the minds of those who are treating patients as well as the board. The third will be a longer-term redesign of the interior. That's going to involve looking at what other systems, jurisdictions are doing, and that will likely go on for many more months.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. McLennan. Dr. McLennan, there has been reports that at Ornge there was some issues in relation to poor dispatching. Has this issue has been addressed in terms of patient safety since you have been appointed to the board?
Right. So there's a number of aspects to the dispatch of an aircraft. It includes getting good quality information early on, processing that information, and then having the aircraft dispatched. All of those phases are being looked at. Some of it requires new technology, new software for information around collecting information on the calls and processing it. So some of that is still being worked on, but all of those individual components are currently being addressed.
Okay, thank you. There's also been reports, Dr. McLennan, that at Ornge there was a shortage of paramedics as well as the shortage of pilots, and as a result of one, of course, shortage of paramedics, then patients couldn't receive the necessary care, and because of the shortage of pilots for shift work, some of the units, some of the helicopters couldn't be in service. Have these issues been addressed since the past 3 months you have been appointed to the board?
So they are being addressed. There still is an overall shortage of pilots. There still is a shortage of critical care and advanced care paramedics. Management is working to address both the pilot and the paramedic staffing issue. It is not addressed yet, but they are being addressed.
Thank you again, Dr. McLennan. Would you please tell us about your medium and long-term strategies at Ornge to address the issues which already exist, and also the future planning and strategies for the improvement of the service of Ornge.
Right, so ultimately, you would like a system where you have fully staffed aircraft who can respond to calls in a timely fashion, recognizing that there are still times down the road when, as a result of weather or an aircraft already being involved with a call, that there will be challenges in being able to deal with high-quality transport for each and every circumstance. Doesn't mean that good quality can't be provided, but there's certain circumstances where it's going to take longer to get an aircraft to a patient. One has to accept that in this system, and it's no different than that in other systems. We're trying to put together a comprehensive quality monitoring process in place which would parallel that of what exists in a hospital environment. And that is a medium to longer term strategy because we don't have all of the building blocks currently in place. But we have strategies in place to deal with them all. Some of the issues that I've addressed, and I'll use the staffing issue around paramedics, that's going to take more than a year in order to address. That takes time to train paramedics, to get the right level of staffing. So some of those are longer-term strategies. But we do have a plan in working with management, and if I was to summarize, it would be to have the same type of quality oversight for Ornge as what exists in a hospital such as Sunnybrook.
And you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Dr. McLennan, I understand that you were a member of the coroner's review of air ambulance services some years ago. Could you briefly tell us the outcome of that review?
I was, in fact, the chief coroner. I did not actually lead a review myself as chief coroner into air ambulance services. The coroner's office may have done so over time. I did not actually lead that investigation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And our next witness is Tim Shorthill, Chief of Staff, Ministry of Finance. And again, Tim, thank you for coming today. I know you've twice been bumped, so I appreciate you being flexible.
No problem.
And you have received the letter for those presenting to the committee?
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you. And our clerk has an oath.
So, Mr. Shorthill, if you could just raise your hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes for a presentation.
Thank you, Chair, committee members, Mr. Auditor General, nice to see you. Good morning. My name is Tim Shorthill, and I'm the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Finance. I thought I'd open with my statement with a brief description of my background. I started at Queen's Park with MPP Gerard Kennedy in 2002. Then in November 2003, I became the executive assistant to MPP Linda Jeffrey. After a year with Ms. Jeffrey, I moved to Municipal Affairs and Housing to be a senior policy advisor to Minister John Gerritsen in December of 2004. In April of 2006, I moved to the Ministry of Tourism as a senior advisor to Minister Jim Bradley. In December of 2007, the minister asked me to be his chief of staff, a role I served until January of 2010, where I moved to my present role with Minister Dwight Duncan. Having been called here, my involvement likely stems from media reports of having been copied on a letter from Ornge to the Minister of Health in January 2011. I do not recall receiving that letter. I'm only aware of the letter through those media reports that state I was copied. I did not read the letter and do not currently have a copy of it. I've had no other contact either through meetings, email, or phone calls with Ornge. I did, however, participate in a meeting with Mr. Alfred Apps, formerly of Fasken Martineau, in the fall of 2010, who was representing Ornge. It was a brief meeting lasting no more than a half hour. The purpose of this meeting, as I recall, was a presentation from Mr. Apps suggesting Ornge was a success story that the government should promote. This meeting occurred during the preparation of the fall economic statement in 2010, and since Ornge was not part of the fall statement, I took no follow-up action after that meeting or at any point since. I do not recall any discussion at that meeting of any of the issues that the Auditor General raised in his report, and with that, I'm pleased to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, and it's time for the NDP to go first. who would like to ask questions?
Sure, I'll start. Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Just building on that last point that you raised, you indicated that Alfred Apps met with you and had a presentation on Ornge and that it was a success story. Is that correct?
Those were his words, yes.
Those were his words. And so his presentation on Ornge, I take it, in terms of the success story, why it was a success, it was the layout or the way in which Ornge was organized with a number of subsidiary for-profit companies blended with the public, ostensibly public companies. Is that correct?
I don't have perfect recollection of the details of the meeting. I do not recall any discussion of any subsidiaries or the organizational makeup. My brief recollection of that meeting was, as I stated, Mr. Apps felt that Ornge was a success story and encouraged the government to promote that. But with respect to the specifics that you asked, no, I don't have any recollection of a discussion of the organizational makeup of Ornge.
Sure, thank you. And just what was, if you could say very briefly, what was he indicating to you, if you can recall, that was the success portion of Ornge? Like, what was he suggesting?
I don't have perfect recollection of that. I think he felt that the provision of service that Ornge was providing was a success. But in terms of what he felt met the definition of success, I think is probably a question better put to him, as I don't have perfect recall on that.
Certainly, certainly. Just not that what he was thinking, but what you recall he was telling you is all I'm.
Yeah, it had to do with the provision of service in that Ornge, in his words, was a success in that respect. Like I said, I don't have any recollection of the organizational makeup.
That's fine. Thank you. Just going to move on to some just in general oversight that your ministry is involved with.
Sure.
Your ministry is obviously very involved with the Sunshine List. That's a component of I
don't know if I'd say very involved. The tradition that has grown over the years is that the Ministry of Finance is responsible for compiling the information that is gathered through the requirements of the Public Sector Salary Disclosure Act. The Ministry then makes that compiled information available both on the Ministry website as well as in a hard copy. It's possible we even produce a CD copy, I'm not aware, but definitely the website and a printed version. Aside from being responsible for those within the ministry that fall within the requirements of the Sunshine List, the Ministry of Finance's responsibility doesn't extend any farther than simply compiling the information.
Okay, and in compiling that information, one of the purposes behind compiling that information and presenting it to the public is to offer some transparency to Ontarians about where public money is being spent. That's essentially the purpose. Would you agree?
Well, I won't propose to give an opinion on the purpose that was for the members of the legislature when the bill was passed, but I don't see any reason to disagree with that statement.
Okay. And then, I mean, in doing so, would you agree with me then that the fact that a publicly funded institution like Ornge, that for all intents and purposes was primarily, 99% publicly financed, that the fact that someone like the executive and other members of that organization did not disclose their salary or not a part of the public salary disclosure, was that something that raised any concerns in your ministry or to you?
I'm not aware if it raised any concerns within the ministry. With respect to myself, I'm not sure I'm best qualified to opine on whether or not the requirements or someone meeting those requirements is a concern. I think that is a question that's best put to the responsible ministry from within which Ornge reports.
Okay, so your opinion would be that the Ministry of Health, being the ministry that's directly involved with Ornge, would have been the ministry that should have been concerned about the salary as opposed to the Ministry of Finance?
No, I wouldn't say that's my opinion. I'd say my opinion is your question is best put to them.
Okay. With respect to Was there an impediment into receiving information from Ornge because of the nature of it being a federally incorporated charity, or because of its charity status?
Sure, that's a question that simply is beyond my expertise and probably best put to ministry officials. I'm not aware of any impediment myself.
Okay, my last question before I pass it over to my colleague, just regarding freedom of information applications or access to information requests. Did you receive, or did your ministry receive any notification that there were a number of freedom of information or applications or access to information requests made in 2010 regarding the salary of executives at Ornge, specifically Mr. Mazza?
I'm not aware, but to be perfectly honest, the way the FOI system works is that there's a division within the ministry that processes those. So I think that type of question is probably better put to those people that administer the FOI process.
And
I'm too far removed from that.
And who are those people?
I actually don't know them by name, but there is a division. There's each ministry has an FOI coordinator, and it would be that person who would have a better understanding of what FOI requests were made and how they were administered.
And last question following up on that, who do you think would be the best FOI coordinator for this particular issue? Would it be the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Health?
I don't know. It all depends on your specific question and where the initial request went to, and sometimes requests are passed from ministry to ministry depending on who actually holds the records, and in this case I'm not actually sure where the records reside.
Okay, thank you.
And you have a minute and a half left.
A minute and a half? Oh, hell. Okay. So you had a 30-minute meeting with Mr. App in the fall of 2010. Who else attended that meeting?
It was Mr. Apps, myself, and Alex Mazur from my office, who's my Director of Policy. My recollection, it was just the three of us. It was about a half hour, but I won't say exactly 30 minutes.
And do you recall where that meeting took place?
Sure. It took place in my office, which is the 7th floor of the Frost South building.
How often do you meet with law firms that represent an agency of the government, and without having that agency present?
Oh, I don't know how many times I have.
Okay, so go back through, from today back, when was the last time you had in your office, like yesterday, the week before, the month before, when was the last time you met with just a lawyer representing a transfer payment agency of the government?
Sure, I have no recollection of that. I meet with a significant number of people in the course of a year. I'm not saying I haven't, but I simply don't have any recollection of when the last time.
But certainly not last week, yesterday, or last month.
I can say definitively it was not yesterday.
Okay, you don't do on a regular basis, meet with a lawyer and nobody else. Who had set up the meeting?
My recollection is that Mr. Apps or someone from his office requested the meeting. It was certainly not my initiative.
Was the meeting requested with the minister and you subbed in, or was the meeting requested of you?
No, as I remember, the meeting was a request of me. So whether or not it came to me directly or to my assistant, I can't remember. But the request was to meet with me directly.
And you are out of time, I'm afraid.
Could you look back through to find that out, please?
I'll endeavor to do that and provide it to the clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we can move to the government for questioning. Mr. Zimmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have five questions. I just want to confirm and ask you, did you have any, in your role as Chief of Staff Finance, any direct responsibility with respect to Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care health policy?
No, I do not have any direct responsibility for healthcare policy. Within my office, there is a healthcare advisor, but on a day-to-day basis, I do not get directly involved in healthcare policy.
Okay. And again, as Chief of Staff Finance, can you comment on what your level of engagement, direct or indirect, was with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care?
Just on an overall basis?
Yes. As opposed to direct responsibility, what was your level of engagement with issues coming up at the Ministry of Health?
Sure. I don't so much have direct engagement with the Ministry of Health on issue management. I would say that my level of engagement with the Ministry of Health on a yearly basis is probably most acute during the budget formation process, simply given the size of the Ministry of Health's budget. I would still, even in that case, characterize my role as an indirect involvement with the Ministry of Health during the formation of their budget process. But I would say on a yearly basis, that is the extent of my involvement.
And thirdly, again, as Chief of Staff Finance, did you have any direct or indirect engagement with Ornge?
No, I had no direct engagement other than the meeting with Mr. Apps, which could be characterized as indirect engagement. To the best of my recollection, that's the only time I've had any engagement with Ornge.
Now, with respect to the meeting with Mr. Apps in the fall of 2010, it's lasted about half an hour.
That's my recollection.
So, from your point of view, at the end of the 30-minute meeting, from your point of view, what was the end result of that meeting?
Sure. I would say there was actually no result of that meeting. The request that Mr. Apps had, or the opinion that he had, was not being contemplated for the fall economic statement. The preparation of the fall economic statement is a consuming process, and to the best of my ability, I try to prioritize my time. Because we had no contemplation of any mention or involvement of Ornge in the fall economic statement, I simply took no follow-up action other than probably a thank you to Mr. Apps, but I never actioned anything or took any follow-up steps after that meeting.
And I want to come to this issue that's come up recently about the $275 million bond issue. And again, in your capacity as Chief of Staff to the Minister of Finance, perhaps you can answer this. It's been raised by opposition parties that with respect to the $275 million bond, the province, if you will, is somehow on the hook should the bondholders find themselves in a position of not getting paid back. Can you comment on that issue?
Sure, I'll comment to the best of my ability. I'm not by any means an expert in securities policy, and I know that the Secretary of Cabinet was before the committee last week and asked these similar questions. He is in a far better position than I to answer those questions, and I simply have no additional information other than what Mr. Wallace provided. The information that has been provided to me by ministry officials and reiterated both by Secretary Wallace and Minister Duncan is that the province had no incremental risk to its debt by this bond issue of Ornge. Beyond that, I simply do not have the expertise to offer up any more insight or opinion on this matter.
Thank you. And my last question, just again coming back to the meeting with Mr. Apps the fall of 2010, after that meeting, and as you said, there was no take-up on your part as Chief of Staff or the ministry's or the ministry. Was there any further contact with Mr. Apps to follow up on his initial idea of including something in the fall economic statement with respect to Ornge?
Yeah, so to be clear, he wasn't requesting any mention in the fall economic statement, simply requesting, I guess, some mention at some point by the government. But to answer your specific question, no, I had no follow-up, no further contact. I'm not aware that my office and my assistant did either. It was, so to say, the last of it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shortle.
Okay, and we'll move to the opposition. Mr. Klees.
Thank you very much. Can you tell me, Mr. Shortle, when did the Ontario Air Ambulance file first come to your attention?
Sure. It probably first came to my attention, frankly, through media reports. So it would be tough for me to pinpoint a time frame, but I think it's fair to say when the media started to generate more and more stories, whenever that time period was, probably, you know, within the last 6 months to a year, that's when it came to my attention.
And when was that 30-minute meeting that you had with Mr. Apps?
My recollection is it was during the preparation of the Fall Economic Statement of 2010. We delivered this statement in November. It would have been unlikely for me to have taken a meeting in November so close to the statement. We generally begin work in early September, so if I had to pinpoint a time frame, I would say September, October of 2010.
Media reports about Ornge didn't happen until the end of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
You just said that you first became aware of Ornge.
Sorry, I was differentiating between Ornge as an organization and the issue that the Auditor General's, or issues that the Auditor General's report brought to light. I did not become aware of the issues until the media started reporting it. Ornge as an entity, as a provider of air ambulance service, I couldn't give you a time frame, but probably a few years I've been aware of its existence.
Okay. In an email dated December 7, 2010, written by Mr. Apps to Jameson Steve. He asks specifically that you, and it is, you have it, yes. He asked specifically that he, Mr. Stevie, invite you to attend a briefing. Did Mr. Stevie ever follow through on that? Did you get invited to that meeting?
No, I'm not. I'm not aware of the email. I'm not aware of having been suggested to appear at any meeting, nor did I appear at any meeting.
The purpose of that meeting was pretty substantive. It was a major undertaking on the part of Ornge. Had some significant implications to, as Mr. Apps said in that email, to the broader government, and specifically he mentioned.
No, I have not.
Okay.
Somebody give him a copy.
Fair enough. This is the email that Mr. Apps provided in his submission to the Integrity Commissioner when he was asserting that he wasn't lobbying.
Just a second, Mr. Klees, do we have a copy of this email?
Well, why don't I provide a copy of that here so that we don't have to waste any more time.
Very well. And I think
Here it is.
I think our clerk has it as well.
You have it as well? The December 7th one. No, this one.
Thank you.
Mr. Apps specifically referred to the fact that there would be significant impact, and it would be important for the Ministry of Finance to participate in that. I'm surprised that something like this, where the request was made directly to the Chief of Staff, to the Premier, asking that you attend, that something as far-reaching as this, that number one, you were never contacted, or you say that you weren't. I'm not suggesting that you were, and that you wouldn't be present at a briefing like that. Does that surprise you at all?
I have no comment. I didn't.
You don't have the floor. Please let the questioning continue. No. Continue, please.
Have a couple of minutes. It's a 3-page memo, single-spaced. He's seen it for the first time. All memos have a context. He should have a chance to read that. So he has the context.
As I stated, you don't have the floor. I will ask our presenter, please take the time you need to read it over and let me know if you have any concerns.
I'm assuming, Chair, that...
We'll give the witness time, please.
Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have 2.5 minutes left.
Is this encroaching on my time?
Yes, it is encroaching.
Chair, that's inappropriate.
Okay, we'll stop the clock and allow him, so you'll get your time.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're stopping it retroactively.
Retroactively, yes.
Thank you.
So you have 4 minutes.
I'm ready when you are, sir.
Okay, so my point simply was the fact that Mr. Stevies was specifically asked to invite you, you didn't get the invitation, and so you know nothing about that meeting.
Yeah,
but you do know.
No comment.
Okay, the 30-minute meeting that you had with Mr. Apps, you made reference in responding to my colleague that the request that Mr. Apps had of you was not being contemplated in the fall economic statement. So Mr. Apps came to see you with a specific request.
Yeah, I don't believe his request was, in answer to the member's question over here, I don't believe his request was any mention in the fall economic statement. That's not my recollection. It was just government at some point should promote, in his words, the success story of Orange. It just happened to occur during the meeting during the preparation of the fall statement, and because frankly that was my priority at the time, and because we weren't contemplating any mention, I took no follow-up action.
But look, he wasn't about to organize a meeting with the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Finance without having a specific purpose for that and a specific ask. And so the ask that he made of you in that meeting was what?
As mentioned, it was, he felt Orange was a success story and something the government should promote.
So
no recollection of anything more specific or broader than that.
So he came to you, representing Orange, with a very specific request that the government of Ontario should promote the successes of Orange. Is that correct?
That's my recollection,
Okay.
yes.
Would you consider that lobbying?
I don't know. I think the question of whether or not that's lobbying or not is a question better put to someone who has more expertise in the definition of lobbying. I'm more used to, frankly, lobbying being requests for funding, to be truthful, at the Ministry of Finance. So I won't say it is or it isn't. It's just, I'm probably not qualified to make that definition.
You mentioned that Alex Mazur was attending that meeting. He is your assistant, is he?
He's the Minister's Director of Policy.
Okay. I'm assuming that both of you or either one of you kept notes of that meeting. Could I ask you to table those notes with the committee, please? Sure.
I've done a search. I have no notes of that meeting. I don't recall Mr. Apps providing any written paper either. If he did, I don't currently have those records. That's not unusual for me. I'm not an avid note taker. But in preparation for today's appearance, I did do a search of my records, and I simply don't. I don't have any. More than willing to undertake a secondary search, though.
If you would check with Mr. Mazur, it would be very, very odd for a chief of staff and someone of Mr. Mazur's capacity that no notes are taken at a meeting. So
I don't think it's odd for me. As I mentioned, I'm not an avid note taker. I try as best I can to process mentally.
Is.
Pardon me?
I'm assuming Mr. Mazur is, and we.
I can only speak for myself.
Okay. I would ask the clerk to follow up with you on.
Absolutely.
And you're on your last minute, Mr. Klees.
Thank you. There are a number of other issues that I need to follow up with you, and we look forward to having you back.
Absolutely.
One last question.
Sure.
Mr. Apps, since that meeting, have there ever been any other occasions when Mr. Apps contacted you, spoke with you directly regarding Orange, and did you report to the minister on your meeting with Mr. Apps?
I don't recall discussing with the minister my meeting with Mr. Apps, and that's not unusual either. I don't report to the minister all the meetings that I take, and so I don't have any recollection of that, and it would not be unusual. In answer to your first part of your question, I've had no contact with Mr. Apps since that meeting. To the best of my knowledge, through email or phone, I've had no contact with him in person since that meeting. In fact, the last time I saw him was here at committee last week.
Did you have contact with Mr. Don Guy?
Mr. Klees, you can invite him back for another time, but you used your time. Thank you very much, Mr. Shorthill.
Thank you, committee.
For the committee. It's appreciated. Our next presenter is from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, and it's Carol McHugh, Deputy Director, Legal Services Branch. Welcome. And you have received the information for someone presenting to the committee?
I have.
Very well, and our clerk has an oath.
Ms. McHugh, if you could just raise your, thank you. Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have up to 5 minutes for a presentation, and then there will be questions from the parties. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Carol McHugh, and since 2003, I've been a Deputy Director with the Legal Services Branch of the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. I became involved in providing legal services for the ministry in connection with Ornge in January 2012. At that time, I was asked to prepare an amended performance agreement between the ministry and Ornge. This amended agreement was signed by both parties on March 19, 2012. I was also involved in the development of the proposed amendments to the Ambulance Act. In my view, the amended performance agreement and the proposed legislation, if passed, provide a strong and effective response to address the concerns identified in the Auditor General's report on Ornge. I would like to speak to you briefly about these two initiatives. The amended performance agreement is comprised of the following three elements. First, the technical material in the original agreement signed in 2005, which had not changed and which was carried over into the amended performance agreement. Second, the transfer payment agreement template, which was prepared by the Ministry of the Attorney General's Commercial Lawyers Group. The Province of Ontario has many transfer payment arrangements across all its ministries. The template serves as a best practices document that is adaptable to different ministries and projects. The third component of the amended performance agreement consists of additional elements which are specific to Ornge and which I will outline briefly. In response to the Auditor General's recommendations, the amended performance agreement contains additional key performance indicators and increased reporting requirements. The amended agreement contains a statement of principles which Ornge must follow in providing its services. These principles include the requirement that Ornge's operations will support exclusively the provision of air ambulance services on a not-for-profit basis. It contains a number of elements relating to quality improvement and patient relations which mirror the requirements in the Excellent Care for All Act. This legislation currently applies to public hospitals. Its provisions are made applicable to Ornge through the amended performance agreement. Under the amended agreement, a number of actions by Ornge require the ministry's prior approval. These include the purchase of real estate, incurring debt, the sale of assets subject to a specified threshold, as well as any changes to Ornge's corporate structure. Ornge is required to post a broad range of information on its website, including its complaints process, its quality improvement plan, and its conflict of interest policies. I have also been involved in the development of Bill 50, an act to amend the Ambulance Act with respect to air ambulance services, which received first reading on March 21, 2012. The proposed legislation, if passed, would provide the province with many of the same powers for intervention in the public interest, which currently exist for public hospitals under the Public Hospitals Act. In my view, there is a useful comparison to be made between public hospitals and Ornge. Both hospitals and Ornge are nonprofit corporations. They are both charities with volunteer boards. They both provide essential health services to patients and are funded almost entirely by the province. However, in the case of public hospitals, the legislative framework includes the power to intervene in the governance of a hospital through the appointment of a hospital supervisor who can assume all the powers of the board and the corporation. This is viewed as an extraordinary power of intervention which exists to protect the public interest. It is an important safeguard which has been included in the proposed legislation for Ornge. However, it is important to note that it will not be possible for the province to exercise this power of intervention with respect to Ornge until it is continued as an Ontario corporation. Currently, Ornge is incorporated under federal legislation. To conclude, the amended performance agreement and the proposed legislative changes were introduced in response to the issues at Ornge identified by the Auditor General. They were designed to increase Ornge's accountability and transparency and to protect the public interest. Thank you again for this opportunity to address you, and now I would be happy to take your questions.
Thank you. And we go to the government first. Mr. McNeely.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. McHugh, for being here today. A lot of the information that I was seeking has come out in what you've presented, but I would just go over some of it. You've obviously read the Ornge Air Ambulance and Related Services Special Report of March 2012. What then would you just expand on what the major changes are in the performance agreement that we have been presented here by the clerk on April 3rd, 2012. It seems to be quite a heavy document. What would be the three significant changes that have been made from the old agreement?
I think the principal statement is very important. It provides that it sets out a number of principles and provides that Ornge shall perform its obligations under the agreement in accordance with them. Firstly, aviation safety and patient care are paramount. Ornge's operations will support exclusively the provision of air ambulance services and related services on a not-for-profit basis. Its operations will be transparent and accountable to Ontarians, full accountability for the use of public funds, public reporting on performance measured according to the key performance indicators, and full commitment to quality improvement activities. The amended agreement contains additional key performance indicators and increased reporting requirements, and to enhance accountability, it requires more detailed reporting of financial and operational information in order to assess the quality and value of the service provided by Ornge, and it contains stronger audit and inspection powers to verify that information. Ornge's demonstrated ability or inability to meet the key performance indicators in the amended agreement is a factor in determining its funding. As I mentioned, a number of provisions from the Excellent Care for All Act were included in the amended performance agreement, and these include a quality committee, patient satisfaction surveys, a patient relations process, including a patient complaints process, and a patient advocate function, a declaration of values, annual quality improvement plans, and performance-based executive compensation. These are all taken from the Excellent Care for All Act, which currently applies to public hospitals.
I think that's good detail on the additional information that we're going to be getting. Certainly, we're here because of the audit and inspection powers of the ministry, or that's my opinion. How are those being changed under the new agreement?
The audit under the 2005 performance agreement, the ministry was permitted to make on-site inspections only twice a year, and under the amended performance agreement, this has been changed to provide for inspections at any time throughout the year.
The position of taking on debt that occurred in the past, you mentioned that. What are the limits on that debt, et cetera, that can take on without ministry approval?
Any debt.
Any debt.
Any debt. I just have to check the agreement briefly here, if you'll give me a minute. I think there's an exception for routine business transactions. For example, purchase of gasoline.
Was there a limit on that?
No.
Okay. The important part, of course, is for the ministry to be able to scrutinize the budgetary performance, and that hasn't been, that wasn't a strong part of the first agreement. Has that been strengthened a great deal?
Yes, I think so. There are extensive budget requirements in connection with providing a proposed budget, having it reviewed by the ministry and approved by the ministry, financial reporting and operational reporting as well. The reporting requirements are quite extensive.
There's proposed legislation to say that the laws governing ambulance in Ontario. You mentioned those in your first statements. What are the changes that will be coming into the air ambulance legislation that are important?
As I mentioned, it imports a lot of the public interest safeguards which are found in the Public Hospitals Act currently and which apply to hospitals. The power for Cabinet to appoint provincial representatives to the Board of Directors, and those provincial representatives will have all the powers of a board member. The power to appoint for Cabinet to appoint special investigators and supervisor, as I mentioned, my opening comments. These actions are taken where Cabinet considers it to be in the public interest, and the legislation contains the same public interest test, very broadly worded, that is found in the Public Hospitals Act.
Are you aware? Are you aware of the hospitals? How does this provincial investigator part work? How does that work with the hospitals? Has that been used in the past?
Those amendments to the Public Hospitals Act were introduced in 1981, and I think they've probably been used in the range of maybe 15 or 20 times since then. I'd be happy to provide that information if the committee would like to have it. When Cabinet appoints an investigator, it's viewed, as I mentioned, as an extraordinary power of intervention, only in the most serious circumstances where there are concerns about governance or financial management or quality of care. And we had an example of it recently in the case of the Windsor Hotel Dieu. I think it's a very effective mechanism.
So you're quite pleased that the new agreement, the new legislation, will put the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care in the proper position in being able to make sure what's happening is happening for the good of the people of the public of Ontario.
I think those are very important safeguards that are very appropriate in this case. Yes.
Okay.
I have no other questions.
Left,
thank you.
Mr. McNeely. You finished? Okay. Thank you. Go to the opposition then. And there's. Mr. Zimmer, I haven't recognized you, but I'm happy to. Go ahead, Mr. Zimmer.
My apologies, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Klees, for the heads up in the document. But it's just, presumably you're going to question the witness on the document, and it's just a partial document because the last sentence is, I'm not at all certain that, and the rest of it is missing. So we need the. You can't put it, it's council. I'm through you, Chair, to council. You know, if you're going to put a document
on this document, and
well, I want to hear from the council on that. It's you can't put a half a document to a person and ask them questions on it.
Would council like to respond?
It's for you to rule, not for me.
Yes. Okay. This is fine. Mr. Klees can ask questions on this. There's an email document beside you there.
Thank you.
That if you want to have a look at. And we'll now go to the official opposition for questioning. You want to take some time to read that first?
Sure.
Actually, okay. Please, not on my time.
We may have to have the witness come back, but yes, I won't count your time. And I will use the same strategy for all people.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
First question relates only to the first paragraph of this email.
give the witness a chance to read it, and then we'll start.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Ready?
Are you
Okay,
fine?
go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your role as the Deputy Director, Legal Services Branch, you've held that position since 2003.
I have.
And you see the email that I put before you. Can you tell us who Mel Springman is?
Mel Springman was a senior lawyer of our branch and was with the branch for many years. He retired in December 31st, 2010.
A respected individual, no doubt, within the ministry.
Yes.
You reported to him, did you?
No. Mel was one of the counsel in our branch.
Okay. The email that you're looking at is from Mel Springman, and it is addressed to a number of people in the Ministry of Health. You are copied on it, and he states, he starts his email off by saying, and I'll read this into the record, I continue to have serious concerns respecting the substance and tone of the MB20, and for those who aren't familiar, those are documents, submissions to Cabinet for approval of a policy. These concerns are a legacy and reflection of the concerns I expressed to you from the outset of this initiative, particularly in terms of successive decision documents and implementation documents. The fourth paragraph down, he goes on to say, whatever one may think of the final recommendation in the MB20 on air ambulance reform, for me the various incarnations of that document have consistently stood on rather flimsy, indeed sometimes misleading grounds. And my question to you is, receiving a document like this with an opinion from a senior lawyer in the ministry, what was your reaction when you read this?
So I'm just looking at the date because I don't recall this email particularly.
The witness responds.
Solicitor-client privilege, the letter is advice
To the minister.
It is not advice to the minister.
Please continue. Please continue.
I think that's a good point, though. It is legal advice to ministry staff.
Counsel, I'd like your advice on this as a member of the committee. You've heard my objection. You've heard the comment on this.
We'll get comment from legal counsel then, Mr. Zim.
And so as I previously indicated to the committee with respect to solicitor-client privilege, it is within the rights of the committee to require a witness to answer a question, even if it requires them to divulge information that is solicitor-client privilege. However, solicitor-client privilege is an extremely important fundamental legal principle in the Canadian legal system, and therefore traditionally legislative committees have kept in mind the importance of that legal principle in deciding whether or not to require a witness to answer questions that would require them to divulge privileged information. It is for the committee to decide whether to require the witness to answer.
Mr. Chair, if I might,
please.
I am not asking for any specific comment relative to any of the details or recommendations of this email. I am asking the witness to simply provide her response to what she, as someone who was director of the Legal Services Branch, when she saw this, what her reaction was. I'm simply asking that.
So I would ask the witness if you wish to discuss this in camera, we can go in camera. If you're not comfortable answering the question that Mr. Klees is asking.
I'm prepared to answer the question just in terms of my own reaction to this email. Excuse me. The people copied were Diane Dougal, who was the legal director at the time, Janice Crawford, a deputy director, myself, a deputy director. So he was copying basically the management team at the legal branch. And then other lawyers who were involved in the file. The email was addressed to his clients. And I don't specifically remember this email, I do know that Mr. Springman had concerns about the MB20 submission. I wasn't, however, directly involved in the file or providing legal advice or reviewing the MB20 or anything like that. It was probably intended more as a heads up that there was an issue.
Okay, thank you. Were you involved in the drafting of the original performance agreement?
I was not.
Did you review it at any time?
In January 2012, when I was asked to prepare the amended version.
Okay. You're familiar with the, where is it here? The Article 15 of the original agreement, I'm sure.
Let me just take a look at it here. Yeah.
That is the article that provides suspension rights to the ministry. It gives the ministry the right to enter the premises and suspend the operations of Ornge if they feel that they have reason to do so. Can you tell me what the difference is between the current performance agreement and the original performance agreement with respect to those rights of the ministry to investigate and to suspend operations?
They're identical.
Okay. You're also familiar with legislation that provides the ministry the right to enter any medical facility. I believe it's under the Alternative Medical Facilities Act. Is that, or help me with the actual name?
Are you talking about the Independent Health Facilities Act?
Yes, the Independent Health Facilities Act.
Last minute now, Mr. Please.
That act, if you could just confirm for me, gives the ministry the right to enter and actually to appoint a supervisor. Is that correct?
Now, I'm sorry, I don't know that offhand, but Ornge is not an independent health facility.
It is not?
No. An independent health facility under that act is a very particular type of facility that's licensed under that act, and Ornge is not covered by that.
Could I ask you to do this for me? Could I ask you to review that legislation?
Yep.
And provide us with an opinion regarding that. And the reason I say that is that my reading of that is because it refers to ambulance as well, and Ornge, I believe, was actually appointed a base hospital. And my understanding is that because it was designated a base hospital, that it falls into that category.
I wonder if you're thinking about the Health Facilities Special Orders Act.
No.
Rather than Independent Health Facilities Act.
Well, you know, I'll take your advice on that, and if you could look at both of those pieces of legislation. And the reason is...
And you are out of time now, Mr.
Okay.
Please.
If we would do that, I would appreciate it. Members of the committee would benefit from that.
We can move to
My
the
pleasure.
NDP, please.
Can I just add one comment in response to that, is that both Article 15, well, Article 15 applies to the ministry taking control only of communication services, not the entire Ornge. And it is in the case of a threat to patient safety. And the same applies with the Health Facilities Special Orders Act. There are very stringent tests dealing basically with patient safety. So I'm happy to provide that information.
Thank you very much, Jagmeet.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Who is the FOI coordinator for the Ministry of Health?
Sorry, I can't remember his name right now.
Okay. And in 2010, would it have been the same person?
It might not have been. I'd have to check into that for you.
Okay. Did you receive any of the FOIs that were requested from on behalf of the NDP in 2010?
The FOI requests?
Yes.
I did not, I'm sorry.
Okay. Were you aware that there were FOI requests made by the NDP in 2010 regarding Ornge?
Not at that time, no.
Okay. And now you are aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of what protocols are followed normally when an FOI request is made?
In a general sense, I am.
And if your ministry receives an FOI request, what's the procedure that's followed?
I think that the FOI office sends the request to the branches that it considers may have information on in response to the request and requests them to respond.
Okay. Do you know if there's any reason why we didn't receive an answer to our 2010 FOI request until 2012?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay. Does that strike you as peculiar that it takes 2 years to receive a response?
It does seem long.
Okay. I'll just pass it over to my colleague briefly.
Thank you. I take it that you've seen a few performance agreements before?
Yes.
You do a lot of them?
Some.
You do some?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that it is unheard of that the ministry would change an existing performance agreement?
It doesn't happen that often.
No. But it has happened?
I can't think of it offhand.
It could happen?
It could happen.
It could happen? Okay. When you were asked to change the performance agreement for Orange, that was the first time that you had any contact with Orange?
Yes. I mean, I'd heard comments about Orange in our office, but I had not worked directly on the file.
Who in your office worked on the Orange file?
That would have been Mel Springman originally, and a second lawyer in our office who worked with Mel, Bill Georges.
Okay. And Bill Georges is still there?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Why didn't they go back to Bill to do the modification to the performance agreement?
Well, it was really more of a workload issue. I think the branch wanted, first of all, a more senior lawyer working on the amended performance agreement, and I was the one who was available, had the time available.
And I'm afraid we're out of time, and I do recognize the NDP didn't get their full time, and if the committee decides, it can request to have Ms. McHugh back again, but you didn't. You were short by 5 minutes on your time. Thank you very much for coming this morning. We're recessed till this afternoon.